Hello everyone, how are you? I hope you're doing great in this morning. Today we are going to be talking about the Gospel of Matthew. But before we go there, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you that every week you are here. You are joining us every week, and you are showing up as a church every week. When I think about the church, I think about you. I don't think about this building. I think about you, about the people who formed this church. And hopefully we are going to be seeing each other soon. So that is my prayer and that is my wish. So let's go to Matthew chapter 9. I just want to say that, but let's go to Matthew chapter 9, verse 9. And it says, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax office. And he said to him, follow me. And he got up and followed him. While he was reclining at the table in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came to eat with Jesus and his disciples. Verse 11. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? Now, when he heard this, he said, it is not those who are well who need a doctor, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I didn't come to call the righteous, but sinners. Okay, so the question that came to my mind when I read this is, why did the Pharisees ask this about Jesus? What did it mean for them, for Jesus to be seated with the tax collectors and the sinners? What made them question Jesus or the disciples of Jesus about these things? And well, because Jesus was considered a religious teacher, this is the reason the Pharisees considered Jesus as a teacher of the law, a religious teacher. And back then, the social and religious order established high expectations for the religious teacher. They used to call rabbi to a religious teacher. And this word rabbi, it's basically, or what practically meant was my teacher. If I say to one person rabbi, basically what I'm saying, or what I was saying, is you are my teacher. That is it. But the point here is that this word is the most honorable term to refer to a religious teacher. It was the highest term to say you are my teacher, with full of honor and respect. A rabbi was a very important person who was distinguished by their formation, their knowledge, their teachings about the Torah and the Tanakh. And when I say Torah, I am talking about the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. These are the 5 books of the Bible, and this conforms the Torah. And the Tanakh, let's put it this way: the Tanakh was the Jewish law. So a religious teacher or teacher of the law, or a rabbi, was the person who talked about these two, the Torah and the Tanakh. And that, I'm talking about these aspects, formation, knowledge, and teachings, was the reason that they had a very high position in the society back in those times. And those aspects gave them the right to have a classroom to teach their disciples. In fact, the rabbis were considered and sometimes called children of wisdom, because they were just capable, very, very capable and intelligent. So that is why they reserved the first seats of the synagogues to them. And the back seats of the synagogues were designated for children, women, and people less important. In fact, a rabbi was not allowed to relate to these people, to women, children, and people of the lower class. Can you believe it? I'm talking about the sinners, talking about the tax collectors, and all of those that they were considered part of the lower class back in those times. So these were the expectations for a teacher of the law. And here's Jesus, a religious teacher, a person considered a teacher of the law. And if you read the Bible, you will find out that sometimes people called Jesus rabbi. Pretty much the Pharisees and the scribes and all of those personalities. So Jesus was a religious teacher. So all of these expectations were to be expected from him as well. But what did Jesus do? Jesus did all of the opposite of these things. So this is the reason that the conflict was created, because Jesus didn't have a classroom to teach his disciples. Jesus taught in the streets. Jesus taught in the houses of the poor that he many times fed. His disciples were people that didn't have a social position or any social position. They weren't rich. They didn't have a theological formation. His disciples didn't have a place in the synagogue. In fact, let me tell you, some of them didn't even go to the synagogues. And they weren't the kind of people that a rabbi or a teacher of the law would relate to. But Jesus did. Jesus did. And it was expected that Jesus would teach the law. But instead, he fulfilled the law. Jesus said, you have heard that it was said to our ancestors, do not murder, and whoever murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, everyone who is angry with his brother or sister will be subject to judgment. I'm reading Matthew 5:21 and 22. Whoever insults his brother or sisters will be subject to the court. Whoever says, you fool, will be subject to hellfire. In other words, what Jesus is saying is, you could be mad at your brother or sister your whole time if you want, the rest of your life if you wanted. But that anger that was born in your heart can make you kill each other. Jesus said in another occasion, the same chapter 5, verse 27, you have heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you, everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So, even when lust was not a struggle, let's say, for everyone, it was something normal. Yeah, it was something that people did all the time. And Jesus says, okay, you want to fulfill your law. Okay, you need to defeat lust. And finally, Jesus said in the same chapter 5, verse 38, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So even when back then you could insult someone back because someone insulted you, Jesus was saying, you have to love them. You have to love those who hurt you. those who you don't like at all. This is what Jesus is saying. You don't have to go teeth by teeth and no. You have to respond with love. Can we now see the conflict here? Well, Jesus was in Palestine. He spent time with the sick, with the women, with the children, with the people of the lower class, with the people that he was not allowed to relate to. And let me tell you, Jesus was the only teacher of the law that washed the feet of his disciples. And you know, the conflict comes when the gospel tells us to do the opposite of what our nature or the social world around us wants or feels comfortable doing. Sometimes there's not conflict when the gospel tells us to love our neighbors as yourself, right? And our neighbor is our favorite person in the world, or our best friend. It is not a conflict at all in that situation. And we do it, and it is okay and great for us, right? Because we are loving our neighbor. Other times there is no conflict when the gospel tells us to pray for one another, and we do it because we like these people that I'm praying for. Or there's no conflict when the gospel tells us to freely give. And when we see a homeless person in the street, there's no conflict if we give him what we have left. There's no conflict in that, right? But on the other hand, there is a conflict when the gospel tells us to love our neighbor. And this means we have to love the people who maybe we don't like at all, right? Or there's conflict when the gospel tells us that we have to forgive those who hurt us. Because each of us are prone to act, to think, to say things that are contrary to what the gospel teaches us, which therefore will bring conflict when living the gospel. And this is why, for you to understand better this is why the psalmist says in Psalm 139 verse 23, "Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my concerns. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way." Lead me, in the everlasting way. So the psalmist knew that he needed to look on the inside. And we are talking about this person who were, inspired by the Spirit to write this verse, this passage. What about us? Do you think that we need to look on the inside? Don't you think that we need to pray for us as well? For God to lead us in the everlasting way? The psalmist knew that he needed to put his nature on display, because he knew that nature will lead him to make decisions, to act or react in a way that will put him in a spiritual conflict. And this is the same today, because it is necessary to understand that there will always be a conflict between our humanity and the gospel, between our society and the gospel, between what we desire and the gospel, between the expectations and the gospel. When we realize that the way we are acting, we are thinking or saying is something Jesus would do, we can expect to have a conflict with this world. Or sometimes even with ourselves. So having a conflict is not the problem. Let me repeat that. Having a conflict, an interconflict, is not the problem. The problem is not having one at all. Because that way we know that we're doing the opposite of what this world teaches. And instead doing what Jesus said, what Jesus did, what Jesus taught and preached. And Jesus tells us to do, or the way that Jesus teaches us to live. So when we face a conflict between our nature and the gospel, let's choose to live as Jesus did. And this is the gospel of Jesus. Because when we overcome our nature, we then start living the gospel of Jesus. You know, the gospel of Jesus is not just singing about the love of God, but to live it. The gospel of Jesus is not memorizing verses, Bible verses, but to live them, apply them to our lives and live them. The gospel of Jesus is not to pray for the people we like the most, but to pray for everyone, including the people we don't like, including the people we don't occur to pray. The gospel of Jesus is not just to know about Jesus or to know about what Jesus says, but to obey it, to live it, and to put it in our lives as the first thing, the first priority. But I have good news. And those good news are that the more we overcome our nature, the more we will get closer to living the gospel of Jesus. So if we overcome our nature, we're going to be closer in the way that we are expected for us to live the gospel of Jesus. And when I say expected for us, I'm talking about what God expects for us to do, to say, to act, or react. So my question for us for this morning is, do you want to live the gospel of Jesus Christ? Do we want to live against our nature, against this world, and in favor and obeying the gospel of Jesus Christ? Do we want to live as Jesus did? There where you are, please close your eyes and let me close with a prayer. Oh Jesus, we are deeply thankful for your word and for the way that you spoke to us in this morning, and to remind us that we need to love as you did, that we need to follow your example when you lived in this world, to love our neighbors, to give, to all of those things that we already knew. We already knew all of these things, but sometimes it is just complicated or simply don't occur to us to do them or to live them. But that is why we ask you for forgiveness, and we ask you for you to guide us and lead us in the everlasting way, as the psalmist says. So Jesus Christ, hear our prayers, hear our hearts and our minds and our souls. Please purify them and help us to continue walking with you. And I want to pray for those who are watching us for the very first time, Lord. I pray that you touch their hearts and their lives in a way that they can be surprised by your power and your spirit. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, this is that is it for today, and see you next week. God bless.
Church is wherever you are. Thank you for being part of our church online. We want to remind you that our midweek prayer time will be next Wednesday at 7 p.m. via Zoom. Even when we are not having in-person meetings, your giving matters. So we invite you to give online. Here's how you can do it. Go to our website, agapememorialumc.org. On the menu bar at the top, you will see the Give button. Click here. In this page, click on the Make a Donation button. In the first section, you will need to choose your fund. You will be able to choose if you want to donate to our COVID-19 Relief Fund, or if you want to give your regular offering or tithe, click General Church. Then, Contributions, and the amount you would like to give. After this, you will see a new section. Choose if you want to give by credit card or a bank account. Fill out your card and billing information, and when you're done, just click on Submit, and you finished giving online. So quick and simple. Remember that another way to do this is to mail your contributions to the church. Just put your contribution in an envelope and send it to our address. Thank you for your support.